Well, I don't know about you, but I have a lot of questions for senior executives of Pfizer, Moderna, and the entire pharmaceutical industrial complex. I'd love to be asking questions of politicians and health bureaucrats and chief health officers and many other people. Unfortunately, I don't have access to them, but it is a bit of a thrill when we get to see people who do have access to them using it to good effect. People often make the mistake of thinking that all politicians are the same. There's no point voting, there's no point getting involved, there's no point getting excited because they're all the same. Well, there's a handful of politicians that are working their backsides off to prove those people very, very wrong. And one such politician is a regular here on the Aussie Wire. He's very gracious with his time, and I'm very happy to have him back here today. Senator Malcolm Roberts from the One Nation Party. Thank you so much for your time today.
Hi, thank you, Topher, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy it ever since our trip around the Murray-Darling Basin. Actually, for years before that, when I first met you.
Well, thank you, and likewise, that trip around the Murray-Darling Basin was absolutely transformative for me, and certainly transformed my opinion of you. And I've found you to be a very, very impressive person who does speak out very courageously, and your work ethic in politics is second to none that I'm aware of. Now, coming to the matter at hand, you've had the opportunity to sit down and actually ask some tough questions to senior people within Pfizer, within Moderna. Can you just help anyone that doesn't understand what senators do and what an inquiry does, understand what it is that this is about, why it is that you get to ask these questions, and are you getting answers in return to your questions?
Several questions in there, Topher. Senate inquiries. This inquiry was an inquiry into two bills before the Senate. One was introduced by me, in fact, on behalf of Senator Hanson. It's her bill. It's to do with prevention of discrimination against people based on vaccine status, COVID vaccine status in particular. And that's a bill that stands on its own. Then there's another bill by Senators Canavan, Rennick, and Antic. I think that's all of them. And they're seeking to amend the Fair Work Act to prevent discrimination, to add vaccine status as one of the things you cannot discriminate against, like race, sexuality, etc. So both bills were being examined at the same time, and we had seven or eight senators there. Five of us pretty strongly on one side of this issue. And we had Pfizer, two executives from Pfizer, and one allegedly to do with the research side of the medical side, and the other one administration or leadership. Then we had some executives, three executives from Moderna and three executives from the TGA, Therapeutic Goods Administration of Australia. So the idea is to inquire of them, ask them questions to solicit answers that will help us to understand better the bill and the circumstances around the bill, to make recommendations then to the Senate as to whether or not to vote for the bill. So that's basically the thrust.
So that's the situation that you found yourself in, or the opportunity, I guess, that you had. What are some of the things that you were seeking to understand from Pfizer, from Moderna, from TGA? What were some of the questions that you were asking, and what were some of the answers that you were getting back?
We were seeking to understand the safety of the vaccines, the effectiveness of the vaccines, the way in which they had been applied, researched, approved, just a whole background around that, and also around the commercial aspects, Topher. Senator Canavan led off the questions. I can remember Matt is pretty sharp, and he just asked a simple question, basically along the same from me as all the questions. The first question was, do you stand by your international president of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, in his comments that this vaccine is safe and effective? Of course, it's not a vaccine, but pardon my use of the word. I call them injections because they're untested, unproven gene therapy-based treatments. They're not vaccines at all. But anyway, we'll call them vaccines for the sake of this. And they refused to answer. They just fobbed the question and went off to the side. And Matt said, let me ask the question again. And he did that 3 or 4 times. They refused to stand by their president. And at the end of it, after 5 minutes, Matt, to my right was Senator Hanson, and then to her right was Matt Canavan. So we were just fairly close. And Matt leaned across and said, that was bloody hopeless. And I said, no, Matt, that was phenomenal, because it showed them they can't answer the questions. Basic, simple stuff. Then Senator Rennick chimed in. No, Senator Hanson chimed in, and she asked them if they condone the use of force to get people to get injections. And the Pfizer executive said there was no force used. And Senator Hanson lit up and just said, come on, these people are in threat of losing their jobs. And then we went to Senator Rennick, I think, and Senator Rennick asked some basic questions about myocarditis and pericarditis, heart attacks. Pfizer had no clue what he was talking about. They didn't understand the basic mechanisms by which their injections are causing all kinds of heart problems. Then I think it was Senator Andick came in, and he asked about whether or not there was any permission sought or approval sought from the Office of Gene Therapy Treatments.
Which is, of course, the subject of a court case right now.
Around. Sorry?
That is, of course, the subject of a court case right now as well, the question of whether or not they were operating unlicensed with gene therapies or genetically modified organisms.
Yep. And then I asked questions about a variety of aspects. One was why the contract's still commercially in confidence. Did you provide a special injection for your employees in Australia? And they said yes, they did.
Yeah, wow.
They were very, very reluctant to answer questions, Topher, and they quite often, as part of their answer, said, well, experts around the world have verified us. Experts around the world have verified approval. Experts around the world have approved it. And on they went. And I said, when are you people going to take responsibility? I'm not interested in what the experts think. And I told them what one expert thought. Well, he passed himself as an expert at the time. Meg Hunt, the former Minister of Health, he said, and I quoted to them, that the world is engaged in the largest clinical vaccination trial. These things are experimental, they're unproven, untested. They had no clue what they were doing, no clue whatsoever, and just reluctant to answer questions directly.
Well, the standouts from that remarkable rundown that you've just given us there, thank you for that, Senator. The standouts for me are, number one, Pfizer apparently admitting on the record that they did not give the same injection to the public as what they gave to their own employees. That would be the inference from how you've communicated their answer to the question. And refusing to repeat the claim that their products are safe and effective. That seems like an enormous red flag. If they're not willing to sit there in front of the Senate and repeat the claim that their products are safe and effective, it has to raise the question of what is it that they now know and accept to be true that we're not being told in the public, at least not officially. We know an enormous number of things, Senator, as you very well know, from the Pfizer papers that were released, from the medical data that's coming out, etc., and yet the official line continues to be safe and effective. Is it fair to say that the pharmaceutical companies themselves are no longer willing to participate in the safe and effective, I won't call it a lie, that'll probably get me banned off YouTube, the safe and effective narrative?
They were refusing to endorse the comments of Albert Bourla. They still maintain they're safe and effective.
Right.
So they wouldn't endorse the comments, but they still maintain they're safe and effective.
Right.
But they use all kinds of devious ways of doing so and give the illusion that they're endorsing them. They used many appeals to authority, which you'd know about. The appeals to popularity, the appeals to what's the other? There's several appeal that they basically don't provide the scientific data. They won't provide the scientific argument. They won't provide the scientific logic. And so they just make appeals to authority. For example, appeals to experts. And they cite, countries around the world have approved this. That doesn't answer the questions. Are they safe and effective? Yeah. And they refuse to answer questions. They just dodged and dodged and dodged. And it was a damning indictment of Pfizer, their own two senior executives in Australia.
Now, people can go onto your Facebook page, and I'm sure the Facebook pages of the senators, your fellow senators that you mentioned there, and see bits and pieces of the questions and the answers, or the non-answers, as the case may be. But as much as this is wonderful work, and I'm so thrilled that there are people like yourself in the Senate and the others that you've mentioned doing this incredible work, I think there's a fair question to be asked here, which is, what's the outcome? When or are we going to start to see some accountability, some real outcomes out of this? It's great that you're keeping the pressure on. Please don't misunderstand me. I'm not minimizing that. But what's next?
Topher, being in Canberra generally is like swimming in molasses. It's just so frustrating. People obfuscate. They're just pushing their own agendas. There's very little truth. There's very little. Most of the policies, decisions, legislation are not based on data. They quite often contradict the data, and blatantly so. There's a lot of ignorance, stupidity, and gutlessness in the parliament, and so people are protecting themselves rather than seeking the truth and seeking to make good decisions. So, having said that, it's even worse with this Pfizer, but with the whole mismanagement of the COVID. The whole mismanagement of COVID, mismanagement of COVID was deceitful. It is deceitful,
Mm.
and it's aimed at transferring wealth and controlling people. That's all it was, and it was never about health, as you know. So that makes it an added line of defense. But and this is where it's wonderfully good news coming.
Mm.
There's a change in the Senate. It used to be that when I stood up, when Jared Rennick stood up, when Pauline stood up and talked about the injections, we'd get yelled at derisively and all the rest of it. Now people just shut up, bow their heads, and they know there's something on. Alex Andy came across to me after I asked some strong questions in the Senate in question time in February, and he came up and said, "Did you see what happened when I asked the questions of the government?" I said, "No, I was too busy asking the question." And he said, "Mate, their body language just says they know there's something wrong." But the admission that there is something wrong won't be made for quite some time because they're still afraid of making it. Politicians don't like admitting errors. They don't like saying things like, "Topher, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Topher, can you help me? I don't know the answer. I made a mistake." They don't like doing that. I don't know why, because it's fundamental to gaining credibility when you admit mistakes.
Yeah.
So, but the tone of the Senate has changed dramatically. I moved a matter of public importance a couple of months ago, and it was to do with having a royal commission into the COVID mismanagement. And every single speaker, including the Greens, including the Labor Party, including the Liberal Party, all endorsed the need for a royal commission.
Wow.
All of them. But the Greens and the Labor Party said not yet. Wait until the states have finished their inquiries, which is rubbish.
Kicking the can down the road.
So it's there. They're now acknowledging there's a problem. They still won't acknowledge the level of deaths due to the COVID injections, the very high excess deaths. Even if you don't attribute them to any cause, the very high excess deaths, they won't attribute them. They won't discuss them. The Liberal Party was opposed because I asked the question of Morrison government when it was in power, could we get access to the Pfizer contracts? No, they're commercial in confidence. Well, Alex Antic moved a similar motion earlier this year, and the Liberal Party supported releasing the contracts. But the Labor Party government, Pocock, Teal, I think Jackie Lambie Network, and the Greens all opposed releasing the contracts.
Yeah.
So they're still hiding. They're still trying to cover things up. But the tone has shifted dramatically.
Look, and credit to yourself and a handful of other great people who really are challenging this idea that I hear from people all the time. It frustrates me. Oh, there's no point. They're all the same. No, they're not all the same. There are definitely some good people who stand up to get elected. Some of them do get elected, and they go on to do great work like yourself and your colleagues there that we've been talking about. Senator Malcolm Roberts, that's all we've got time for today, but thank you for this very encouraging update, and please keep up the great work. Please encourage your colleagues to do so. You are speaking out for hundreds of thousands and indeed millions of Australians when you stand up in the Senate and you speak, and I'm very grateful for it. Senator Malcolm Roberts, thank you.
Thank you, and keep going with the independent news. This is the only way to get the truth out, Topher. Thank you so much for what you're doing.
Cheers.